My name is Taylor Hawkins. I'm 35 years old, and today I want to tell you the story of my life, a journey carved with wounds, fleeting joys and pains that never faded. I'm sitting in a small wooden house on a hill in San Diego, looking out at the Pacific Ocean, shimmering beneath the setting sun. The sea breeze carries the scent of salt and memory. My father rests not far from here beneath the pines that overlook the waves, and it feels as though every gust of wind carries his voice. He was the man who taught me how to rise after every fall, and though years have passed, his presence remains stitched into every corner of my heart. To understand how I became the man I am now, I must go back to where everything began, back to when I was just 5 years old, watching my world fall apart. I was born in San Diego in a modest house close to the harbor, where the sound of ship horns mixed with the cry of gulls. My father, Thomas Hawkins, was a tall, strong man with calloused hands and a voice both warm and steady, though his eyes always carried a sadness I could not yet name. He worked on the docks unloading cargo, his shirt often soaked with sweat, but his embrace was always gentle. My mother, Elizabeth, had golden hair and a smile I once thought was the center of the universe. That smile vanished one rainy afternoon when everything I knew changed. I remember clutching a tattered teddy bear as shouts echoed from the next room. My mother's voice was sharp, my father's tried to stay calm, and then came the slam of a door that seemed to break the house in half. I pressed my face against the window, watching her walk into the rain with a suitcase beside a man I had never seen. She did not look back. I cried quietly, not understanding why. My father knelt and wrapped me in his arms, whispering, "It's just you and me now, Taylor. I promise I'll never leave." From that day on, she was gone, and he never spoke her name again. I searched for her in small ways. Once, digging through his drawers, I found a faded photograph of the three of us, my mother smiling, my father holding me, a chubby boy in his arms. I hid it under my pillow and stared at it each night, trying to hold on to a warmth that slipped further away with every year. My father, though devastated, refused to let grief break him. He left the harbor job and began taking odd work, fixing cars, delivering goods, even selling food on the streets. He took me everywhere. I learned early how to fold laundry, cook instant noodles, and read maps to guide him on long drives. He made each hardship a lesson, teaching me to endure with dignity. At night, under the glow of a small lamp, he sat at the table, sketching business plans and writing figures on scraps of paper. I could hear him sigh, but he never quit. He'd tell me that life was hard, but if we fought and persevered, there would always be a way forward. By the time I was 8, his persistence gave birth to a small company, Pacific Wave Shipping. At first, it was only one rusty truck and a few clients, but to him it was the foundation of a dream. Every contract is a brick, Taylor, he told me, ruffling my hair. I'm building us a house. I watched him through long nights on the phone, negotiating, making promises he would bend over backward to keep. Some days were brutal. Once the truck broke down in pouring rain, and I stood beside him holding tools while he worked through the storm. Another time a major client canceled, and I found him slumped at the table, his head in his hands. I brewed a small cup of coffee the way a neighbor had taught me and set it in front of him. He looked at me with weary eyes and smiled faintly. "Son, you're the reason I don't give up." As years passed, Pacific Wave began to grow. We moved into a tiny office, and slowly the debts became fewer, the smiles more frequent. When I was 12, he bought us a small house in the suburbs. For the first time, I had a room of my own and a bed that didn't creak with every turn. It wasn't luxury, but it was home. My father would sit with me in the evenings, reminding me that this was only the beginning. He dreamed of fleets of trucks, even ships crossing the oceans. "One day, Taylor will stand at the top," he said, eyes alight with hope, and I promised myself I would help him get there. Yet, even in those better days, a shadow lingered. I still longed for a complete family. At night, I imagined a mother's voice, a hug dinners with everyone gathered together. But I never told him. I knew he had given me everything he could. Still, I felt a storm approaching one I could not yet see, only sense in the way he sometimes smiled like a man holding on to something fragile. And then one evening he came home with a strange glint in his eye, telling me he had news that would change our lives forever. That evening my father called me to the living room. He hesitated, something unusual for a man who was always so steady, and then he said the words I never expected to hear: he was getting remarried. For a moment I felt as though the ground shifted beneath me. In my heart, our family had always been just the two of us, bound by promises and long nights of struggle. I'd never imagined sharing him with anyone else. But when I looked into his eyes, I saw a joy I hadn't seen since my mother left. I swallowed my unease, forcing a smile. "I'm happy for you, Dad," I whispered. That night, though, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling a storm gather on the horizon. Her name was Vanessa. She appeared one sunny afternoon, standing in our living room with a bright smile and polished elegance. She was young, barely older than 15 years my senior, with wavy brown hair, crimson lips, and a fitted dress that accentuated her curves. My father introduced her with pride, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Taylor, this is Vanessa. She's going to be part of our family." I mumbled a greeting, but inside something churned. She knelt in front of me, her voice sugary. "I've heard so much about you. I hope we'll be close." Her words were sweet, but her eyes betrayed something I couldn't name, something cold and insincere. I excused myself to my room, leaving my father's hopeful gaze behind. The wedding came quickly, held at a beachfront hotel with chandeliers glittering and strangers filling the hall. I stood alone in a corner, wearing the suit my father bought me, watching him hold Vanessa's hand with a happiness that felt distant from the man I had known on the back of an old pickup truck. He deserved joy, I told myself, but loneliness crept deeper into me. A year later, Vanessa gave birth to twins, Amber and Aiden. My father hugged me tightly at the hospital. "You're a big brother now, Taylor. I trust you to take care of them." Through the nursery window, I stared at the two fragile babies. A spark of warmth flickered in my chest. Maybe this was the family I had always wanted. But reality proved harsher. As time passed, Vanessa revealed her true nature. Around my father, she was affectionate, always clinging to him, always orchestrating grand dinners. She didn't cook, always inserting herself into conversations about his company. She treated Pacific Wave as though it were hers, offering naive suggestions that my father gently brushed aside. To me, she became sharp and critical. "Taylor, you should learn to be more refined," she'd say, her tone sweet but her gaze icy. I swallowed my anger, knowing she saw me not as her stepson, but as a rival for my father's attention and legacy. Amber, her daughter, grew up mimicking her mother. Even as a child, she learned the art of flattery, clinging to my father and making him laugh with her rehearsed charm. Yet when it was just the two of us, she mocked me once, throwing my old toy robot into the trash, sneering that it was tacky. I salvaged it quietly, hiding it in my closet. Aiden, however, was different. From the beginning, he had my father's eyes, clear, honest, full of wonder. While Amber paraded her expensive toys, Aiden built wooden ships with his hands, asking if they looked like Dad's vessels. He'd sneak into my room to share his creations, and I'd tell him they were perfect. He became the light in a house that often felt colder than any I had known. Despite the growing tension, my father remained devoted to me. Late at night, when Vanessa and the twins were asleep, he would call me out to the backyard. Together with steaming cups of coffee, we'd sit on a bench overlooking the Pacific. He spoke of the future, his dreams of expanding Pacific Wave, and one evening he told me softly, "One day, Taylor, you'll take over. You'll do even better than I ever did." I wanted to warn him about Vanessa, about the unease that gnawed at me, but I couldn't bear to dim the happiness I saw in his eyes. So I stayed silent, vowing in my heart to protect him and everything he had built. The years rolled on. Pacific Wave grew from a single truck into a fleet of ships and offices across the city. We moved from our modest home into a sprawling mansion in La Jolla, where glass windows caught the sunlight and gardens overlooked the sea. It should have felt like a dream fulfilled, but to me the house was cavernous, echoing with silence that no wealth could fill. Vanessa strutted through it as though it had always been hers. Amber followed in her mother's shadow, and only Aiden's presence kept me from drowning in resentment. When I turned 18, the storm I had long feared grew unbearable. Vanessa's icy smiles, Amber's disdain, the constant battle for my father's attention, it all pressed down on me until I felt suffocated. I knew if I stayed, I would be consumed by their schemes. And so I made a choice that tore at my heart. I left. I applied to Stanford University, determined to stand on my own, far from the gilded cage Vanessa had built. The day the acceptance letter arrived, I found my father on the backyard bench, staring at the sea. His eyes lit up as he read the letter. "Son, I knew you'd do it. Promise me, no matter where you go, you'll come back. Pacific Wave is yours, Taylor." I nodded, but in my heart, I feared what I might return to. Leaving San Diego for Stanford was both liberation and heartbreak. I carried only a suitcase, a handful of books, and a small wooden ship I'd carved with Aiden's help. He was 5 when I left, and he ran to the gate that morning, his little hands clutching my arm. His eyes were red from crying, but he managed to whisper, "Taylor, will you come back to visit me?" I pressed the miniature ship into his palm. "Keep this, Aiden. I promise, no matter how far I go, I'll always be with you." He clung to me, unwilling to let go, and I forced myself into the car without looking back, knowing my tears would spill if I did. Stanford was a different world. The lecture halls were filled with ambitious minds professors who demanded brilliance and students who seemed born to lead. I chose business administration, determined to learn how to safeguard Pacific Wave from greed both inside and outside the company. While others enjoyed the privileges of wealthy families, I worked part-time jobs, survived on scholarships, and studied late into the night. My father sent money, but I rarely accepted it. I wanted to prove I could stand without leaning on him. Each week I called home, hearing his voice brighten as he spoke of Pacific Wave's contracts and the fleet he was building. Sometimes Aiden grabbed the phone, describing with excitement how Dad had let him stand at the bow of a ship. "Taylor, it felt like the whole world was mine," he said once, and I smiled through my exhaustion, picturing his hair whipping in the sea wind. 4 years later, I graduated with honors. Instead of returning immediately, I pursued a master's degree in financial management, determined to deepen my knowledge before stepping into my father's empire. Those were years of relentless work and modest living. I rented a tiny apartment, shared meals with classmates, and wrote papers until dawn. Yet whenever I received one of my father's handwritten letters, I felt grounded again. His words always ended with the same line, "I'm proud of you, Taylor. Don't forget your way home, your way." At 26, I finally returned to San Diego. My father met me at the airport, his hair streaked with gray, his face lined with years of struggle, but his eyes still burning with fire. He embraced me tightly. "Son, it's time you stood by my side." I joined Pacific Wave as a project manager, and within months I immersed myself in contracts, shipping routes, and logistics. Older colleagues doubted me, whispering that I was just the boss's privileged son. But I worked harder than anyone, inspecting cargo, negotiating terms, and refining operations until even the most skeptical learned to respect me. My father watched with pride. "You're truly my son," he said, and my heart swelled with the weight of his trust. But returning to the La Jolla mansion reignited the silent war I had tried to escape. Vanessa greeted me with her flawless smile, but behind it was tension sharp as glass. Amber, now 14, flaunted designer clothes and expensive tastes, treating me with disdain barely veiled as indifference. I ignored her, but Vanessa was more dangerous. She began appearing at company meetings, introducing herself as an advisor to my father. She spoke of markets she didn't understand, offering ideas that sounded polished but were hollow. I bit my tongue, restraining myself from openly dismissing her, knowing my father still cherished her presence. The only comfort was Aiden. At 14, he was tall and unpretentious, his eyes bright with the same wonder I had seen when he was a boy. He preferred the docks to luxury malls, listening to sailors' tales of faraway seas. Often he would sit with me in my office, asking how ships were managed, sketching his own designs for vessels he dreamed of building. "I want to captain a ship one day like Dad," he said, and I hugged him proud of his heart. He was the only light in a house clouded by jealousy and ambition. Still, Vanessa's shadow crept further into Pacific Wave. I overheard her urging my father to reorganize his assets to secure Amber and Aiden's future. She pressed him subtly always, with that honeyed tone that concealed sharp edges. Once behind closed doors, I heard her suggest expanding into real estate, abandoning shipping entirely. My father only chuckled, brushing her hair aside. "Vanessa, you don't understand this industry. Don't worry, I'll handle everything." But I clenched my fists, realizing she would never stop until she carved a place for herself in the empire he had built. One night under the moonlit sky in our backyard, my father took my hand. His voice was quiet, almost trembling. "Taylor, everything I've built will be yours. Pacific Wave. The estate, all of it. I trust you to divide it fairly. I know you'll do better than I ever did." The weight of his words pressed against me like a storm, but it was also the greatest honor of my life. I promised myself I would never let him down. For the next 2 years, I worked tirelessly helping Pacific Wave expand into Los Angeles, Seattle, and finally Houston. We were no longer a small regional company. We were becoming an icon of the maritime industry. Yet, even as success mounted, I felt Vanessa's and Amber's eyes watching me, waiting for me to stumble. I lived each day prepared for battle, clinging only to the bond I shared with my father and Aiden. But storms have a way of arriving without warning, and I could not have imagined how quickly everything would collapse. One crisp October morning, as I reviewed a contract with a Japanese partner, my phone rang. The trembling voice of my father's secretary came through. "Taylor, come to the hospital now. Mr. Hawkins, he's had a heart attack." The moment I heard the words heart attack, everything inside me froze. I dropped my pen, bolted from the office, and sped through San Diego's streets as if time itself were collapsing. My father, the indomitable man who had carried me through every storm, could not be lying helpless in a hospital bed. When I arrived, Vanessa and Amber were already in the hallway, their eyes red, their clothes immaculate, as though grief had been carefully staged. I rushed past them, demanding to see him, but a doctor stopped me. His voice was calm, yet heavy, as though each word carried lead. "Mr. Hawkins, I'm sorry. We did everything we could. Your father's gone." The world tilted. I stumbled into the sterile room where he lay, his face peaceful but lifeless. I took his hand cold beneath mine and whispered through my tears, "Dad, I'm sorry I couldn't do more." Vanessa entered behind me, her sobs loud, her arms wrapping around me in an embrace that felt rehearsed. Amber stood at her side, crying, but her eyes flicked toward me with something I could not name, resentment, calculation, perhaps both. None of it mattered. All I wanted was my brother. And when Aiden arrived hours later, rushing from Berkeley, he collapsed into my arms. "Taylor, I can't believe Dad's gone," he choked, and together we clung to each other, two sons weathering a storm that had taken our anchor. The funeral was held at a grand church in downtown San Diego. Hundreds came, employees, partners, old friends from the docks. Vanessa and Amber stood at the front in black dresses, their poise unshaken. I stood beside them, silent, feeling the eyes of the city upon us. Aiden arrived late from his campus, rushing to me as soon as he stepped inside. His embrace was the only genuine comfort I felt that day. My father was buried on the hill he had loved overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The sea breeze carried the sound of gulls, and I remembered him saying once, "The ocean teaches us that every wave passes, but you must be strong to face them." I laid white flowers on his grave and promised aloud, "I'll protect what you built. I won't let anyone destroy it." A week later, we gathered in the office of my father's lawyer, David Carter, for the reading of the will. The air was suffocating as Vanessa sat rigid in her chair, hands clasped tightly while Amber fidgeted beside her. Aiden sat next to me, holding the small wooden ship I had given him years earlier. Mr. Carter read with deliberate calm. All assets, including Pacific Wave shipping estates and personal properties, would be transferred to me, his eldest son. A trust fund was left for Amber and Aiden, but management of the estate was mine alone. Silence fell like thunder. I felt Vanessa's stare burn into me, her lips curling into a strained smile. "Congratulations, Taylor," she said, her voice syrupy but trembling. Amber bit her lip, eyes downcast, disappointment plain in her posture. Only Aiden whispered to me, "I don't need anything. I just want to remember Dad." His words pierced deeper than any inheritance could. After that, the mansion in La Jolla became unbearable. Vanessa and Amber's presence was suffocating their smiles masks for resentment that grew sharper by the day. I left, choosing instead to live in a small wooden house on the hill near my father's grave. It was simple, a few rooms and a balcony overlooking the sea, but it gave me peace. Each morning I walked to his grave, placed fresh flowers, and spoke to him about Pacific Wave, about Aiden, about my struggles to carry on. I managed the company from a distance, relying on my laptop and phone, going to the office only when absolutely necessary. The employees respected me, but I knew Vanessa and Amber were waiting for me to falter. Aiden became my anchor. Though he was in his final year at Berkeley, he made time every month to visit, always bringing flowers for our father's grave. We'd sit on the balcony of the wooden house, eating hamburgers from the old diner Dad once took us to, sharing stories. One evening, he looked at me with earnest eyes. "Taylor, I don't want to compete with you. I just want us to be brothers the way Dad would have wanted." His words softened the hardness in my chest. I promised him that when he turned 30, I would share our father's estate with him, no matter what the will said. He shook his head, saying he needed nothing, but I knew deep down it was right. He deserved it. He carried Dad's heart within him. For a brief moment, amidst grief and responsibility, I felt hope. Hope that I could keep Pacific Wave alive. Hope that Aiden and I would rebuild what had been lost. Yet storms have no mercy. On the morning of my 35th birthday, as I returned from laying flowers at my father's grave, I found a package on my doorstep. It was wrapped neatly in silver paper, no name, no return address, only a small card that read, "Happy Birthday, Taylor." I picked up the package, turning it over in my hands. It was heavier than I expected, the silver paper, carefully folded, the handwriting on the card unfamiliar. A chill ran through me, though I told myself it was only a gift from a business partner or one of Pacific Wave's employees. Inside was a Rolex Submariner, gleaming in white gold. It was stunning expensive, the kind of watch people flaunted to prove their success. But holding it in my palm, I felt only discomfort. My father's old Seiko sat on my nightstand, scratched and humble, a watch that carried meaning no luxury could replace. This Rolex had no place on my wrist. I thought of Aiden working late nights at Berkeley, pushing himself to graduate with honors. A gift like this could encourage him. That afternoon, I rewrapped the watch, tucked a note inside. "Aiden, this gift is to cheer you on. I'm proud of you, Taylor," and shipped it express to his dorm along with cookies from the diner we both loved. I felt lighter afterward, believing I had done something that would make him smile. The next day, as I reviewed reports at the wooden house, the doorbell rang. To my surprise, Vanessa and Amber stood outside. Vanessa wore a pristine dress, but her face was strained, her smile brittle. Amber trailed behind her eyes, scanning the modest home with disdain. They hadn't visited me once since I moved out, and suspicion prickled through me. I invited them in, and the conversation began with small-talk questions about the company and perfunctory remarks about my birthday. Then, Vanessa asked casually, though her tone carried urgency, "Did you get anything special yesterday?" I hesitated, then nodded. "A Rolex watch. It's nice, but not my style. I sent it to Aiden. He deserves it more." The moment the words left my mouth, Vanessa's face drained of color. She shot to her feet, shrieking, "What, you sent it to Aiden? Are you insane?" Her hands trembled as she grabbed her phone, her voice breaking into panic. "Why would you give it to him? Why didn't you keep it?" Amber looked up, horrified, blurting, "Mom, you said." But Vanessa silenced her with a scream. She dialed frantically, shouting into the phone, "Aiden, pick up. Please pick up." Her voice cracked, growing more desperate with every unanswered call. I demanded to know what was going on, but she ignored me, her face twisted in terror. "Taylor, you've done something terrible," she gasped. "If anything happens to Aiden, it's your fault." Before I could press her, the television cut into an urgent broadcast. The anchor's voice shook as he reported, "An explosion has occurred at the University of Berkeley in the student dormitory area. 3 students have been confirmed dead. Police are investigating." My knees buckled. Moments later, Aiden's photo appeared on the screen, his smiling face from his first day at Berkeley. I froze, unable to breathe. Vanessa let out a piercing scream, her phone clattering to the floor. Amber sobbed, hiding her face while I stood rooted in place, the world collapsing. I stumbled for my keys, fury and dread consuming me. "Vanessa, what do you know about this?" I demanded. She stammered, denying, but her eyes betrayed her. I left her there and sped north toward Berkeley, praying against hope. By the time I reached the campus, smoke still rose from the ruined dorm. Police blocked the area, ambulances swarmed, and students stood in shocked clusters. A uniformed officer confirmed what I already feared: Aiden was among the victims. My chest caved in, my brother, the boy, with dreams of designing ships gone because of a gift I had sent. I collapsed against the barricade, tears streaming, whispering his name. At the hospital, they showed me his body charred and broken beyond recognition. Only the leather bracelet I had given him for his 18th birthday remained intact on his wrist. I took his hand, cold and stiff, and whispered through sobs, "Aiden, I'm sorry. It should have been me." Detective Miller from the Berkeley Police approached me later, grim-faced. "Mr. Hawkins, this wasn't an accident. The Rolex contained a sophisticated explosive. It was designed to detonate when the box was opened." His words pierced like knives, but they also ignited the fury burning in my veins. I told him everything: Vanessa's visitor panic when she learned I had sent the watch to Aiden. Soon, the FBI and ATF joined the investigation. At their office, Agent Connor Cruz laid out the truth: the Rolex had been purchased through the dark web, with funds traced to a bank account under Vanessa's name. Encrypted messages revealed her request for a special gift to resolve inheritance disputes. The device had been meant for me. Her scheme had backfired, killing her own son instead. I sat in that sterile office, my heart split between grief and rage. Vanessa's greed had finally consumed everything, even the child she claimed to love. Within days, she was arrested at the La Jolla mansion, screaming that she never intended to hurt Aiden, that she only wanted to protect her family. But the evidence was undeniable. I wasn't there when they arrested her, but the FBI told me she collapsed in hysterics, shrieking Aiden's name as they pulled her away in handcuffs. Neighbors watched from their windows, the once envied wife of Thomas Hawkins dragged out in disgrace. The news spread across San Diego within hours: stepmother accused in deadly Berkeley explosion. Headlines painted Pacific wave in scandal, though the employees rallied around me, insisting the company had nothing to do with her actions. Still, I couldn't bear to open a newspaper. The very thought that Aiden's death had been caused by his own mother's greed was too much to endure. Amber was shattered. Though cleared of any involvement, she was questioned repeatedly by police, her name dragged through gossip and social media cruelty. Once she sent me a short message, "Taylor, I'm sorry. I didn't know Mom was capable of this." I never replied, not because I wished her pain, but because I had no strength left to untangle sincerity from pretense. I could not carry her grief on top of my own. Vanessa was eventually diagnosed with a severe mental breakdown and confined to a psychiatric hospital. From what I was told, she spent her days muttering Aiden's name, crying, cursing herself, lost in a cycle of guilt and denial. I did not visit. I could not look at the woman who had plotted my death and instead destroyed her own son. I only hoped her torment would be endless, that she would live out her days haunted by the face of the boy she had sacrificed to greed. Aiden's funeral was small, private, stripped of grandeur. I didn't want reporters or curious onlookers, only a few close friends from Berkeley, a handful of Pacific Wave employees who loved him, and myself stood around his coffin. His face had been partially reconstructed by mortuary staff, but I still saw the scars, the marks of an end too violent for someone so pure. I took his hand one last time, whispering, "I should have protected you, little brother." Then I buried him beside our father, on the hill overlooking the sea. The pines swayed gently, the horizon painted gold, as though the ocean itself mourned with me. On his stone, I had engraved Aiden Hawkins, lover of the sea. When the last mourner left, I sat alone between their graves, staring out at the water. I imagined seeing them together on a ship, my father standing tall, Aiden at his side, both waving to me from the horizon. Tears came not out of weakness, but because I knew I would never hear their voices again. In less than a year, I had lost both the man who taught me resilience and the brother who embodied everything good in our family. In the days that followed, I moved through life like a ghost. I managed Pacific Wave because I had to, because the company was my father's legacy, because quitting would dishonor everything he had built. But each evening when I returned to the wooden house on the hill, I felt the silence press down. I began keeping a journal, writing every memory I had of my father and Aiden. The truck rides through San Diego, the nights under the lamp sketching business plans, the afternoons when Aiden showed me his drawings of ships. I wanted their stories preserved not just in my heart, but for future generations of Pacific Wave, so they would know it was born of love and perseverance, not greed. I also created a scholarship in Aiden's name for students pursuing marine engineering. It was my way of fulfilling his dream, giving others the chance to design and captain ships like the ones he had once sketched with such wonder. Each time I signed a scholarship award letter, I felt closer to him, as though I were keeping my promise even beyond his grave. Amber eventually disappeared from public view, withdrawing into isolation. I heard she stopped attending social gatherings, stopped posting on social media, and lived quietly, consumed by the shame of being known as the daughter of a murderer. I didn't pursue contact. My life no longer had room for shadows of deceit. Now, as I sit on this hill between the two graves, the sea stretching endlessly before me, I realize the cruelest lesson of all: greed can destroy everything. Vanessa's ambition had devoured not only her own life, but her children's, leaving only wreckage. But my father's love and Aiden's bond with me remain unbroken. They are the only inheritance that matters. I whispered to them both, "I'll keep going for you. I won't let greed win." The ocean breeze carries my words across the waves, and in that moment I feel as though they answer back. No matter how great the pain, I know I must endure. If you found meaning in my story, please like this video, share it with others who may need strength, and subscribe for more stories like this. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.